Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 110. We are going to be talking about the band Sunn, or often referred to as Sunn O, although they're not necessarily horror.
Yeah, this will be our second non-horror episode in a row, so if that's what tickles your titties, sorry.
Welcome to it.
Yeah.
You can email us at whatThe, WHATTHE, at scarythoughts.org. Do you have any plugs?
No.
I do. Drift Loss, which is my collaborative project with Colin Marston of Gorguts, Krallis. He and I have this sort of ambient adjacent project called Drift Loss, and Zum Audio is putting out a cassette of our most recent album, Derealization. So you can find that at Drift Loss, one word, on Bandcamp or via Zum Audio, ZUM Audio. And that's it.
Yep.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. So Sunn started in the late 90s.
Yep.
Two dudes, pretty much, right?
Greg Anderson and Stephen O'Malley.
Yeah. And then I think, I don't want to get like too deep into like their history and the gear rundown and stuff like that, because they are extraordinarily Penn and Teller about it. Like you can find out anything about these two dudes in this band. Like they are very open with the history and the gear they use and how they do things. And I think having watched a lot of that stuff, I don't think I'm going to do it any better than them speaking about it. So I would suggest, if you're that interested, I mean, and also you probably, if you're like, fuck yeah, Scary Thoughts is covering Sunn, you know already.
Yeah,
You know?
so maybe us explaining what it is for those of you who don't know what it is, or for those of you who are like, yeah, let's hear what they think it is. We'll keep this part short.
Super fun.
Sunn O is a duo.
Sunn or Sunn O? Let's like get here.
I go back and forth all the time.
Yeah, I had like in the early 2000s when I thought, obviously, you know, Karen O, Sunn O must be the case,
Right.
you know? And then I've heard record nerds, who I think are the worst people on earth, be snarky with other people about it being Sunn. Just Sunn.
I've heard Greg say Sunn,
Yeah, I've heard both members of the band say Sunn.
but there's an O in the name, so what are you going to do?
Yeah. I guess
Yeah, who
the
cares?
the O is silent.
The street
But
finds its own.
There's also three right-facing parentheses as well at the end.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, what do you do with that?
The sound emanating.
Yeah.
So, in short, Sunn is a guitar-driven drone band.
Mm-hmm.
Their music is incredibly slow. It is glacial. It is basically guitar tone.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost all it is. There are no riffs. There's no rhythm other than the waveforms naturally beating against each other. And it's very much about a specific kind of gear. The amps that they primarily play through are these amps that I think stopped getting made in the 70s
Yeah, Sunn
by a
novelties.
company called Sunn.
Yeah.
Sunn O. They took their band name from this gear company. And it's this like, if you drive them heavy, they do that really Black Sabbath doom heavy wash. And so imagine, you know, we're not going to play any of their music on this episode, but just sort of imagine just the bass and guitar droning from Black Sabbath for 40
90
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah,
90
90 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. It is kind of that simple.
Yeah. Well, I should also, okay, and I guess we can get to like why we're talking about them right now.
Yeah.
We just saw them live, and it was both of our first time seeing them
Yeah.
live. And then I had listened to them primarily to drone my wife out at home when she's on phone calls. And that was the main thing. And then I also kind of like droney music to sleep to and whatnot. So that's kind of like where I had approached them, but I'd never seen them. And it's one of those bands that has a lot of lore around like what it's like to see them. And I think that is unbelievably fun. Like, you know, like whether it be Gwar or Kiss or any of these more like theatric bands, you know, there's the whole deal like, oh, they wear cloaks and they fill the whole room with smokes. Like, so you can't see the person next to you and, you know, you'll vomit because of the bass end or whatever, you know. And it reminds me of that whole like legend around Pink Floyd where they were trying to find a note that made people shit themselves.
Yep.
Like, it definitely feels like somebody was like, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also to see them live, I mean, very little happens. The music is slow and droning, and you're just watching two guys stand there in robes, almost never strum their guitars. You mostly never see them because there's so much fog. But the stage is a wall of amps and cabinets. That's sort of an expression. But that really is kind of their thing. It's not just like, oh, they're so loud. They got all these amps. It's like, well, no, it's almost like an art installation. They have, each of them has like 4 Sun-driven Model T full stacks plus their SVT 810s on the wings. Like, it's just a lot of amps.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at.
It is.
'Cause the amps themselves are very cool looking, and they do a really good job with their merch and ephemera, sort of like, because they refer to those amps as kind of like really the members of the band too. Like they're characters on stage, and that they think of themselves as just another circuit in that system, which I think is pretty cool. In an age where everything is digital and streamed, this is a thing that like kind of demands you see it. I mean, there's really nothing like it. Maybe some really drony moments at a Neurosis show. Approach it, but that's how long is that? Like 2-3 minutes, maybe at the most.
Yeah, I mean, going in, I was very excited about the show, but I think I realized as soon as they started up, even though I listened to mostly drony music, I just found standing there at the Great American Music Hall, I don't know how long I really want to stand here and experience this. Like, I'm into being here. This is awesome. And I see my friends around and we're all in it together. But I don't actually know how long I want to stand and hear this. And then after about 45 minutes, I was kind of hoping it would never end.
Yeah, I was feeling like it would never end at about 45 minutes. Yeah, the crowd was interesting. It was definitely felt like a bunch of fellow travelers. You know what I mean?
It was the one thing, I think I pointed it out to you as far as the audience that was weird, is all the guys seemed like exactly who you'd think. Like variations of metal and music store nerds.
Yeah.
But all the women that were there, pretty much every single woman there.
And it's like a 20-to-1 ratio.
Easily 20-to-1. Yeah, there were maybe 10 women.
Even less than like a normal metal show.
Totally. Yeah. They all had like $400 haircuts and $2,000 worth of clothing. They all had like these constructed, asymmetrical, post-Martin Margiela, incredible footwear. They were all dressed like curators.
Yeah, like Blade Runner type people. Like, yeah, like if there was a curator character in Blade Runner, that's what these women look like.
All of them.
Yeah.
But all the guys just looked like guys in denim jackets.
Yeah, but like Japanese denim. You know what I mean? Like, I'm speaking for myself.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
I felt like such a parody of myself standing there with like that. You had handed me that Zero book title.
That's true.
So I'm standing there with my Japanese denim jacket, my like the fucking $200 black hoodie, like just like an asshole.
Speaking of their audience and their fans, I think it is interesting to me that there are lots of drone artists and bands, and they were, I'll talk more about it later, but they were inspired by the band Earth.
Yeah.
So it's not like even the very core of what they're doing didn't invent it necessarily, but they've kind of approached it in this interesting way because they're both these sort of like metal hardcore guys.
Yeah. They love everything that you love.
Yeah.
Like anyone listening to this, like these dudes are like deep students of all the rad shit.
Yeah. They're fans.
Yeah.
But they've created this thing that's almost more, no, I shouldn't say almost, that is more of an art project than a band in a sense. Like the amps are a third member of the band and it feels like an art installation. Both of them have come to, especially Stephen O'Malley, do a lot of things in art spaces. I saw Stephen O'Malley basically playing the bass notes on the organ at Grace Cathedral when Callie Malone played. They've definitely infiltrated a lot of art spaces, and I think it has a lot to do with the way they've approached it so single-mindedly and so committed to the minimalism of the project.
Yeah, it's also really top shelf. Like when they work with other people, it's not like some clown at the coffee shop that they know. You know, it's like
Scott fucking Walker.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like nobody works with Scott Walker.
yeah. That was like his last project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that, you know, and then like I was thinking about how like I felt no urge to shit on the experience or like be snarky about it at all. And like I was looking around, I was like, man, you could easily like kind of see a person hating on this.
Oh yeah.
But like it's not like those like laughable videos you see of like a backyard noise show in Portland where you're like, oh, you guys will just look mad like that mom didn't give you Hot Pockets. Like that's what this looks like to me. But like, I mean, maybe it's $250,000 of amps on stage that kind of sells it.
Yep.
But there's something different about it. And I think that there's like, you call it an art project. I would almost go as far to call it as a practice. Mm-hmm. You know, like it feels like something that they get to do with each other and they wanted to do with each other and it evolved into this thing. I mean, this sounds so crazy, but it has almost as much to do with like partner yoga as like a band kind of. Yeah.
I think another thing that they are, in a sense, borrowing from visual art, culture, and sensibilities, and it works really well in that. I think they've also borrowed from, you know, we're currently in this era when everybody's really into witches and the occult, and that's still happening and it's still infused into music. And I think, you know, they've been doing this project a long time, so I wouldn't say they were early on it, but they didn't just show up and start being witchy. It is a ritual. They wear robes and there's all this smoke and their movements are very methodic and ritual-like. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, it feels a bit theatrical, like, oh, they're doing the thing that I guess you're supposed to do when you're doing a ritual in robes. But actually, that is what it is.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't feel like I've seen black metal bands like performing satanic masses and shit, and it looks fucking embarrassing every single time. Like every single time, everyone involved should be embarrassed. But this, there's something about it that just feels like in your mind is Stonehenge by Spinal Tap. Like it, you know, like you're like, okay, let's acknowledge the pioneers. But it's almost like as their sound is to Black Sabbath's Paranoid album, their look is to like a ritual. Like it's like a toned down, everything essential about it.
Yeah. And I think that also the commitment to it, you know, you could go like, you go to the Halloween Superstore and you get some robes and then you fill a room full of smoke and you act like it's a ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did one thing for what, an hour and 45 minutes or however fucking long that show was.
Yeah.
There's no pretense there for me. Like the full commitment to it is so whole.
Yeah. And the cloaks look cool. You know, they're like obviously handmade.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the creatures in Lord of the Rings, the Nazguls? They look like Nazgul cloaks. Yeah. Anyway, like, how do you not know what a fucking Nazgul is?
You said Lord of the Rings, and all I know is that there are elves, but I've heard of those from before.
Have you not read Lord of the Rings?
No, I didn't read it when I was the age to have, or Dune. Like,
you haven't read Dune either?
No, I should have read them when I was 13, and I didn't, and now I would be embarrassed to do so.
Huh. I mean, The Hobbit's kind of stupid, but the other books are pretty solid.
Probably.
Yeah. Weird. But you read Game of Thrones?
No.
No? Okay, good. I'm making
I
sure.
just watched it. I watched it and enjoyed it.
Did you see the Lord of the Rings movies?
Yeah, but I couldn't.
Okay.
I could not tell you a single thing about any of them.
Lots of walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that I remember. A lot of orcs, a lot of walking, a lot of standing on hillsides proclaiming things.
Yeah. Crying.
I remember Schmeagol.
Yeah. That's what like
cute.
Black metal musicians look like in my mind. It's just Schmeagol. They all look like that.
But they think they look like...
yeah, whatever would be cool. Like the Kurgan or something. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kurgan.
Well, we were way off topic here.
Yeah.
But not too off topic. I mean, we're talking about their look and the ritual. You said that you had listened to an interview or something with the woman who does the smoke machines. Yeah. And I was like, why is this like a person that does, isn't that just a pedal on the floor that they stomp on? But fuck, man, they must have like 12 smoke machines.
I know. That's a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
Something that came up that was interesting to me in listening to interviews with the members of the band is that, so, you're a teenager. You start a band with a bunch of friends. You're like, we want to sound like Corrosion of Conformity or Fishbone or fucking Ani DeFranco, like whatever.
Yeah.
But if you stick with it long enough to get good, you'll probably end up doing something interesting. You have the potential to do something interesting with it.
This is totally Harold Bloom's anxiety of influence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
like,
of
totally.
course. And when they started, Earth is the coolest band. Let's do that for ourselves. Let's just like do what Earth did and just have fun. And there's a little bit of a thing of they've both been in so many amazing projects that they're a little confused. Like, well, why did this band take?
Yeah.
And those other bands didn't quite as much.
And on paper, this is the band that like violates the Marilyn Manson rule the hardest, which is never make a song with a beat that confuses a stripper.
Yes.
I mean, this song doesn't even have a beat.
Yeah, totally. And Con 8, which is one of Stephen O'Malley's former bands, is one of my favorite bands, period. And in fact, my band with Andy Connors, My Heart and Inverted Flame, we talked about Con 8 a lot. It's funny because people, when they talk to us about the band, they bring Sunn up a lot. And we're like, yeah, totally. But it's actually Con 8 that is the band that we spoke about a lot.
Yeah,
there's in reference to what we wanted to do. But the influence thing I was thinking of is that they feel so unique, but it still is just one of those bands. Like, let's do a thing like that other band.
Totally.
And you do it long enough and they become Sunn, which completely overshadows Earth or almost anything in the drone metal crossover arena as far as like scale, respectability, ticket sales.
It's kind of, it's kind of interesting is like in the 90s, I would kind of trafficked in this like industrial adjacent noise shit. Like I would go to like a noise show or
do you mean I Hate God when you were living in New Orleans?
Well, I Hate God's a metal band. It's like a little different. But I mean like people would do noise shows.
Oh, okay,
yeah. It'd be a thing. You go to it and it's always felt like, what am I doing here? Like,
I love noise shows.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. I think just people.
I've never had a bad time at a noise show.
It's like Talladega Nights style. It's like I don't know what to do with my hands. Like it feels like that's what's the overarching thing. And I feel like it would be a really heavy lift to take somebody cold off the street and get them into that. But I think that you could say, here's some weed and some headphones. Check this out. Tell me what you think. And this is, and that's like a long way of saying, I feel like this band is such a higher level than anything approaching it. Like the next closest thing like it is not even worth mentioning. Well, actually it is. It's like, it's their influence, Earth, kind of. Yeah.
But what I also appreciate about them is they're named after an amp. Mm-hmm. And their whole approach is how do we overdrive that amp with guitar, strumming, and feedback and sustain. Their pedal situation is incredibly minimal. So ultimately, to my mind, it's about timbre. The music is about like capturing that sound.
Yeah.
And what I think is funny is that to my mind, the most recent two albums, Life Metal and Pyrosmith, they made them both with Steve Albini. Mm-hmm. They did a lot of recordings there, a lot of outtakes, but it sounds like they really got to sink in at Electrical and make this music. And what's funny is them doing that thing at a like one of the most revered recording studios in America actually, I think, kind of is their best material.
I think Life Metal is the best album.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, they've been working on this one sound and not really evolving it much. It just sounds better and better.
It sounds like Life Metal, what it sounds like to me is if there was like a Conan movie that you hadn't seen that had Schwarzenegger in it in his prime, and there was the moment where he lifted up his sword and the orchestra swelled. Imagine just that for an hour.
Yeah.
Like that's like the whole, it starts off with those fucking horse noises and you're like, what is this magical adventure I'm about to go on, and that the other thing that's so surprising is how different the albums sound. Like for something that is essentially just like two dudes plugging in their amps and waving their guitars around in robes, which sounds dumb as fuck when you describe it like that. Like there's like a lot of differences. Like there'll be like that one Something Oblivion album has like French horns on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned noise shows, but I was thinking about that during the show that in a sense, they're maybe the most successful noise band of all time, even though they're like playing in the idiom of metal by anybody's, that's where they came from. That's kind of their setup and all that. They're kind of a noise band. Ultimately, they have more in common with Hijo Kaidan or something like that, or Masana or Merzbow than they have in common with Black Sabbath, or certainly like...
This is our least accessible episode by far. Like all those bands you mentioned.
Sorry.
Look, if you're listening now, this is your shit. So, buckle up. But I was just thinking about it.
If we mention anything you don't know about, go check it out.
Yeah. Especially for this.
Go listen to Earth, go listen to Hijo Kaidan, go listen to Masana.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally derailed you.
No, that was it. Yeah. I also appreciate that you can buy a Sunn pedal. They have their own.
I kind of want it.
They're great. Andy, my bandmate, has one. Ultimately, it's not anything you can't cobble together out of like a Rat pedal and some mods, but I really respect that they've put it in these really beautiful enclosures and working with Earthquaker Devices, which is a very respectable guitar pedal company.
Yeah. If it was a more limited edition sort of situation, I would probably buy one.
Yeah.
If there was only like 50, I would for sure buy one.
I was thinking that when I was at the show too, is I've wanted one of their pedals for a long time, but I kind of can't justify it because I kind of can get that sound with what I already have. But yeah, if they had like Electric Blue ones limited to 50 at the show, I might have just thrown the money down.
I don't like think about things as I guess I do sort of think about objects as like not so much financial investments, but a thing that is special and its rarity will make it even cooler over time just because of the coolness of it. Like I'm definitely into that. Like speaking of gear, they have a ton of gear breakdowns on YouTube. One of them is really funny because they go through all their shit and then they have like a Sweetwater, you can buy this list. And so you could theoretically just buy everything they talk about. So I was like, I wonder if you could just like if you and I had $250,000 to spend on all this shit, how different it would sound than what they did. I mean, I imagine quite a bit, but I wonder how close. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, that often comes up in certain minimalist projects where dial in on some very few elements, and it often obfuscates the question of like, I could do that. Like, yeah, you probably could. Why don't you just sit back and enjoy the show?
Well,
and not do it.
This is like one of the things, like when you look online, you see like, oh yeah, really just feedback. I could do that. It's exactly the same shit of like somebody who looks at a Rothko or something. It's like, I could do that.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, no, you couldn't.
Yeah.
And second of all, you didn't. And the fact that you didn't, and there's a time that this emerged, like a temporal, event that demarcates some art happening. Anybody who does anything like this after will be compared to, in some ways, to this band. And then there will be anxiety created between the artist that has referenced them, and that will create something new. That's the Harold Bloom thing.
Right.
But it seems like it's so much about the gear.
Totally.
But not in a really annoying way. Like it's I don't know why these guys seem to get away with like, I would like laugh at this. Like it's borderline Emperor has no clothes.
Sure.
Discourse here, but it resists that.
I feel like if you step back, it would be easy to think of Sunn as being so self-serious. Their design, the robes, the music, all of it. But what's funny is when you see interviews with them, they're not great interviewees. They're a little bit
They're boring.
Restrained. Yeah. But they're both total music nerds. They're both stoked about whatever. They both seem genuinely into like, wow, I'm in a band and I get to tour around with these big amps
I
and
feel
play
like-
all over the world?
I
This
feel
is
like-
rad.
Yeah, I feel like they would do this on Sunday in their suburban homes if they were like dads living next to each other. You know what I
Right,
mean? It has that like a thing that these guys are always going to do together.
Right. Although there's also part of me that totally believes that, but also was watching them and thinking after about an hour and 20 minutes, going like, is this fun for them? They've both done this like barely strumming, holding one hand up in the air thing 30 of the last 35 nights in a row.
Yeah.
Are they just like, fuck yeah?
Yeah, I wonder where on the spectrum
know?
like Kurt Cobain, Teen Spirit,
Oh, yeah.
to Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby But Got Back they are, you know,
Yeah.
because they're like, you know, Kurt Cobain famously hated the song and wish he had never written it, you know, which is stupid in its own way. And Sir Mix-a-Lot's like, yeah, this is why I have a Bentley. Fuck yeah. I'll be at your corporate event, no sweat,
Yeah.
you know, which I think, you know,
It's great.
I appreciate that quite a bit. I mean, to me, the whole thing seems like it would be really fun to do. Like, if you could do that, like, I was always a really bad musician, and I was kind of attracted to this drone sort of thing because it was like, well, I have bartending money and I can buy pedals. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And so I had like kind of a pretty cool droney setup after I'd given up actually trying to learn how to play guitar. And then I got poor again and sold all of it, you know, as it happens. But I could totally see just assembling this thing aesthetically, choosing the gear, doing the stuff is just, there's probably so much pleasure in the curation of this whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all their merch and shit looks good. It looks cool.
It's great.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is interesting about all their stuff is it's not referencing, well, it doesn't feel like it's visually referencing out. It's very focused on like the wiring diagrams of the amp or some sort of like geological image or something like that. I mean, I guess the album covers do vary quite a bit, but it doesn't feel like, oh, this is about Lord of the Rings or whatever. Like
Exactly.
Yeah.
It feels very self-contained. Another thing that maybe people don't necessarily know is that when I bought tickets for the show, there was an option to buy a higher tier ticket where you get to actually come in way early and watch them sound check. I think it was like double the price. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't
Yeah.
like an ultra VIP thing. It was just like pay more, come listen to them sound check. And I sort of feel like if I had a higher income, I would have absolutely done that because it would have been more of it. But also, I'd imagine their sound check is interesting because they're dialing in that sound.
Yeah.
And to my mind, it would be slightly different than seeing another band's sound check, like,
Yeah.
or even a band that takes pleasure in their sound check. Imagine a band that, like, yeah, they sound check for 2 hours because they run through a lot of material and they actually enjoy playing together or something like that. That with this band, it's almost like an extension of the project, like dialing in the tone that is just as much the art as the real show.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and when you told me about the sound check thing, in my mind, it was like one of those dumb meet and greet things where it was like, oh, I can, you know, shake James Hetfield's hand or something
In front
like that.
in front of the amps.
Yeah, or stand there and ask like Tenacious D some dumb question, you know, that I don't really need to know the answer to,
Yeah.
you know, that I'm hoping will be such a great question that sparks a friendship. Like, I think that's like every person who goes up on the mic thinks that they're
That's
going to like,
amazing.
it's going to be like, oh, look at this person. They're the smartest person ever. Give them money.
Nobody ever is.
Yeah, nobody ever is. But now, knowing what I know about having seen it, I would have for sure, if you had said, hey, dude, do you want to pay for this? I'd be like, yeah, let's pay for this. Like,
Yeah.
I'll buy these tickets. Like, it's awesome. We should also talk about, like, what this particular show is like perhaps the most stripped down version of them, like, in a while. Like, it was just the two of them. And none of
Do they normally tour with other members?
There are shows, you know, there'll be like the French horn player or whatever, you know, the trumpet player, and sometimes like, you know, there's a woman that does vocals on one, so they would have a bit of that, you know. I don't think it's like the Polyphonic Spree size ever, but yeah, like I think it's back to like, it was considered like a, you know, back to basics sort of thing from what I was reading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like this performance was the most stripped down of any of the music of theirs I had heard.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, man, we were joking about like if they were going to play the hits, because I don't know that I would know any, from one album to another, especially when your body is just experiencing something totally different than just listening.
Yeah.
Like my feelings hurt watching that show. I mean, it was like no joke. I'd seen people describe various physical things. One thing like that I thought was really interesting was like in one moment I was like, am I like moving back and forth? I didn't realize I was doing it. And then I looked around and I stopped because I was like, fuck that. And then I looked around and the whole audience was like swaying a little bit. It was really interesting.
Oh, wow. See, I've always had a thing about attending droning minimalist shows where you have to stand, that it sort of doesn't make sense to me. So when you experience music, even if you're not like, quote, dancing to it, you have a physical response to it. That's just who we are and how we are. You might unconsciously tap your feet or nod along or sway in time with the rhythm. You go see Prince, you'll probably dance. You go see Swans, you're not going to probably dance, but your body will probably unconsciously like shift around in response to the music.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I noticed this for the first time when I saw Tim Hecker live, which is just total sustained sound, that my body hurt fast. Like, it's one thing to stand. It's another thing to stand in place in a crowd where you're not going to move your feet, but you're not even really responding to the music. So your body is static.
Yeah.
And it gets uncomfortable very quickly. And I certainly found with the Sunn show that I had to like consciously be shifting my weight around so that I wouldn't freak out for how much my body didn't like standing so absolutely still for so long. Another thing I found interesting about the gear question again is that, and pardon me if you already know this or everybody listening knows this isn't something I really knew. But, when you go to a concert at the Enormo Dome and they have those speaker arrays, they're hanging from the ceiling and there's like 20 speakers kind of in an arc.
Yeah.
So let's say you're at that show and you see on stage they have like, the guitar player has like 5 guitar amps. You're like, whoa, that's loud. Well, actually, you do not hear those amps.
Yeah, that's just the back line.
0. Those array of speakers, it's also not, wow, that's a lot of speakers. That's like, you are hearing one of those speakers. You are not hearing stereo. You're not hearing the speaker above it or below it. You're hearing the one that's pointed at you. So the thing of having a ton of amps on stage as a like We Are a Loud band when you're at a certain size venue is actually irrelevant. Even at a venue like Great American Music Hall, depending on the band, you're not hearing shit from the stage. You're hearing the PA.
Yeah, the venue.
Right. Sunn, completely different.
Yeah, it's coming at you like a train.
Yeah. Those amps are genuinely pounding the shit out of you.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in the venue. They might be mixed into the PA. I didn't even notice because, especially in the low end, low end tends to be more non-directional. It's hard to, when you hear a bird chirping, you can kind of tell where it's coming from. When a cement mixer rumbles by, it's harder to tell where it actually is. The rumbles are...
Yeah. I mean, it's shaking where you're at. I mean, that was the thing too. I was like, man, I wonder if this band was like, had 5 times the gear, if like the whole fucking city would hear it.
Right.
It's so...
Well, I sort of wonder how much damage they've done to venues.
I was thinking about that too. Like
the Great American Music Hall has seen like a century of shows. I think if anything would have fallen already.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be Sunn. It would have been a long time ago. But I'd imagine sometimes they've got to do some damage.
I just thought about like what sort of damage have they done to themselves? Like what is their hearing like? Like I mean, because it's right when you walk in, there's a whole thing full of like earplugs, and it says like you should fucking wear these, dude. And like I have like really high decibel blocking earplugs just because I can't sleep next to our stupid French bulldog without them. But yeah, even with them, I was like, man, I got to push these in deeper. Like this shit is like not pleasant. And some parts of it were really unpleasant. Some parts of it were just like, it just hit a frequency that felt pleasant. You know, it was interesting. Sure. Like, and I wonder, talking to them, like, they must have an awareness of it because people talk about it, but I wonder if they're intentional with those effects at any point, or if it's just more about sound for them.
Yeah. Don't know.
Well, I had my one note, which was talk about LRAD devices, which now I don't know why. But, I do know why. I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, so if you don't know an LRAD device, it's those big sound cannons that the cops use on protesters. And, like, they fuck people up pretty bad. But they also use them when there's, like, a typhoon or something like that, because they are so loud and so clear that you can hear them without distortion relief. So they're actually kind of like cool audio inventions. Like,
I'm sorry, if there's
say there's like a big disaster and all the power's out and like there's no radio, they'll, instead of just having like on a speaker, like on a cop car, they'll like they'll use the LRADs in like tactical ways. Like they'll use them to announce things sometimes. And sometimes they'll just turn them on like a yard full of terrorists and blast them at Gitmo or whatever, you know, just some bullshit. But I was wondering, like, what if we had like 30 of those in a band? Like how that would be pretty cool. Like
you could play 30. A show and ask everybody to like go stand a mile away. This is where it sounds best.
We have like $30 million worth of like Raytheon sound gear. Amazing. Just punishing people.
You write up the grant application. Let's see if we can get this going.
Yeah, or like we just do a GoFundMe. Like Chad and Marc buy anti-personnel audio gear.
This is a good idea.
Getting an LRAD?
Doing a GoFundMe for an LRAD.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't know if
Hey, everybody, if this actually happens, please donate.
I feel like the ATF is not going to like this idea. This fucking cunts.
It's for art.
Yeah. We could get our art project on, I guess. What kind of music do you want to play through it? Just like this? Just droning music?
Like the sippy cups, like music for children.
Oh, just like Baby Shark, just blasted.
Yes.
Yeah. Gnarly. So dark. One note I had was like, you could totally torture people at Gitmo with this music. And another question I had was like, I wonder how global this experience is. Because in the room, it's all long-haired white guys with jean jackets and black hoodies.
Yep.
100% of the crowd, except for the aforementioned women with their stylish outfits. Like, do you go to like wherever with this? You know, I don't know. Like, are the guys in Mdu Mokhtar, are they down with this?
Right.
You know, like, which is kind of a droney sort of thing, but from the desert and sort of psychedelic and different.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely get interesting people interested in them. Like, again, they've worked with Scott Walker. They've worked with Boris. God, who else have they collaborated with? I'm forgetting offhand. But
is there like a Jay-Z that's
Oliver.
Into them? You know what I mean? Or like, for example, but I mean, again, it's like that. I feel like once you get to a certain level of
Kanye is going to save his career by associating himself with Sunn.
If I was Sunn, I wouldn't. But do you think if Kanye was like, hey, Sunn, let's do something together, bros, or whatever. I don't know.
It would not actually surprise me.
I would, there was an interview where he was like talking about Penderecki or something like that. So he is like he's an artist. Like that's the only way I could say it is like somebody who's an artist gets into more challenging art. I think it's just natural.
Sure. I mean, we all did, a 16-year-old kid on a skateboard doesn't necessarily not have access to Ligeti, or Kulthum. Like it's all music is everywhere. So Kanye talking about Penderecki doesn't make him a good artist.
Yeah, but I would say that like it makes you a good art fan, which is part of being a good artist. It's like a necessary condition, like or sufficient condition. I can never remember which one's which, but
you could say it's necessary. You could say it's sufficient. Sometimes it's both.
Yes. I don't think that's the answer in the LSAT, though. I would for sure go see this band again. Like I'll go see them every time they come near.
Yeah, I would bring a lawn chair though.
Yeah, Yeah, it's definitely. But then we were talking before, like if I would fall asleep, and I was watching a little interview, like not an interview, but it was is one of those like hour-long YouTube documentaries about them, and they had some. What I thought was really interesting was they had a lot of conversations with the crowd and people talking about. A lot of people had an experience similar to me, which is you just get there and you're not doing anything, you're not looking at your phones, you're getting into this kind of weirdly meditative state. And it reminded me of working long. I mean, it sounds bad, but it's also kind of good. Of working a long shift where you're just standing at the bar and you don't have a pre-phone, and you're just fucking standing there and there's nobody there. And you just get deep into your thoughts and you're thinking about like the kid that sat 4 rows in front of you in 3rd grade. And like you remember a detail about his like stupid face that you popped in your brain out of nowhere. And I find like going into those sort of like daydreamy states to be really fun. And it seems to be something people come see this band and sometimes follow this band to experience this very specific, like sun generated meditative state.
Yep.
Yeah. I would love to take one of these albums into one of those float tanks and just
for sure,
like get like 50 milligrams deep into an edible and just crank this shit in a float tank.
Oh, totally. And did I on the podcast talk about the whole thing about sound baths and all that?
No, we haven't talked about sound baths, but I wanted to bring that up.
Okay, yeah. So this really came up. So Andy, my bandmate, his girlfriend, Drew, she and her partner do sound baths. So it's very funny. Andy and I, here's the difference. Andy and I, at least when he lived here, he recently moved out of town, but we would meet twice a week and practice and rehearse and go over this shit constantly. And his girlfriend does these sound bath performances. They never rehearse. They just roll in with their equipment, with their cars. We have to rent a U-Haul. They charge $80 a person.
Oh, Jesus.
And always sell out. And they are doing, in an effect, just a noise show.
Yeah.
And I say that when I say just, I'm not dismissing either noise shows or what they do, but they just like roll up and do sensorial performance.
Yeah.
For the experience. It's not about music. It's about creating sensational sounds. So it's this, Andy and I have always had this thing like we went at this entirely wrong.
Yeah.
Like but of course they're like cute young witches that have a great Instagram account and we're these two old guys that could never sell.
You need to go be their Phil Spector and like like make this shit happen.
Totally.
Like, have a band called like the Dronettes or something.
Oh my God.
It's so good.
And when he was when he was telling me about this, it really I'd been thinking a lot about the fact that like when I would work at the door at the Makeout Room, for example, which is a venue, I really, really noticed that there would be a live band killing it on stage and people would like roll up and I'd go, hey guys, it's $5. And they'd turn to each other and go like, $5 for what? Like literally. And I know that they just paid $20 for an Uber that went 7 blocks.
Yeah.
And I know that they're willing to pay $18 for a cocktail, but they won't pay $5 for live music. But they probably would pay $80 for a sound bath. And, I think that's about the whole millennial and into Gen Z paying for experiences and privileging experiences over other kinds of things to spend money on.
Well, the sound bath, unlike the live band, does give you more energy for writing emails the next day.
Oh, fucking totally, right? No, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like
it's just to say like the sound bath, no wonder they're making money. People want experience. People are paying for experiences. They don't care about your fucking like 7th generation post-punk band as much.
Yeah.
They just will not pay for that, let alone buy merch.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I mean, the economics of music are just like completely fucking deranged.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so, like when if you want to put your Marxist fedora on, it's just like the few have so much and the majority have so little. Like, I mean, it seems like so few people are rewarded, but they're so overly rewarded. I mean, what's over? I mean, it's like, you know, is Springsteen worth 200 million? I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But I mean, and the thing is, it's like anybody who's pretty good at music, it's a rare skill. Even though a lot of people play instruments and music's all around us, like being able to do it well is uncommon, you know, and it seems like it does not follow the same route of like an uncommon thing being worth something, like the scarcity. But then that's the other thing is like, there's no scarcity with music. Like my phone, I can listen to like, you know, most of the Sunn albums. I'm sure there's a bunch of some rare shit that Andy has that, you know, they made out of like a sock or something, you know, like some crazy shit. To me, it just baffles me. Like I've known people in my life who are more talented guitar players than I am talented at anything. And it basically does fucking nothing for them. It's the weirdest thing.
Yep. I'll say it again. Like, this is why most artists are politically on the left, is art and capitalism don't line up very well. They sometimes do, but they kind of actually don't. The value of art doesn't fit the capitalist model. It's trying to do something else with value that isn't as easily monetized as shoes.
Yeah.
It's too ephemeral.
I mean, yeah, like, I don't even know that like you can fit that on that model onto music though, like the capitalist critique model. Because I mean, I imagine there was probably a pub in like 1100s Britain that somebody was like, "Oh, I get off the fucking stage," like to some lute player. You know, they weren't having it. Maybe,
oh, sure.
Like, yeah, it's yeah.
But what's funny is, oh shit, what book was I reading that was talking about? Okay, I'm recalling this argument out loud. So art as we know it today is a construction. It is something that came up. You know, that lute that lute player was not like an artist with a hustle.
Right.
They were closer to like a craftsman or something like that back then.
Yeah.
We have these histories of like Bach and things like that, but they were all indentured to the church and to the monarchy. And then there was folk music, painting, art, and all that. But this idea that being an artist is your identity and it's what you do for a living, and that it is somehow tapping into some sort of non-denominational higher power. Mm-hmm. That's all pretty 20th century, this idea of the avant-garde, that I have something in me that I need to express, and it is almost against the world, or certainly it is outside of society. That's all a whole fucking new thing. That's not what artists were doing in previous centuries. And that is because of capitalism. Capitalism, ironically, always has its boot on the neck of art. But it also created the conditions where an artist could go like, where, let's say, again, a musician, a person who makes music can go like, hey, maybe I don't need a day job and I don't need to celebrate the church. Maybe I can make it on my own and actually critique all that shit. Capitalism made that possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, like I feel like there's just something about music, maybe it's like the numinousness of it or something like that doesn't even make it make sense in the capitalist critique to me. It's just like for example, like say that there was a system, you know, we lived in a global worker system and we decided that like music was labor and it was given its due, and you know, like an okay musician, somebody who would have gotten an album deal, now can live comfortably about the level of a plumber. But not that many, but it's like just like a plumber. Like, you know, maybe there's like a couple rich plumbers that own a bunch of trucks or whatever, but like, what effect does that have on music? You know, like, is there something about the absolute rarity and specialness and the fact that like you either dance to it or you don't? Sunn O accepted or Sunn accepted, you know?
Yeah.
Like it either rocks your world or it doesn't. And like the degree to which it does is the degree to which you were compensated as doing that, you know? Because 100% of the people I know that like bemoan heavily like the plight of the musician and our musicians, they kind of suck. Like, I don't know anybody who's fucking great arguing about that, like personally.
I think everybody's arguing about it because the economy has genuinely bottomed out. And the worst thing, and again, this does not refute my belief that art and capitalism will never be friends, is that the value of art and, let's say, music, because it's the easy target, the value of music and the way musicians can support and sustain themselves did not shift because of music fans. It did not shift because of musicians. It shifted because of thieves.
That's another thing I was going to talk about is the industry around music seems particularly predatory, like aggressively predatory.
Well, that has always been true, but it went from predatory and unfair to erasing the value of it completely by people who do not give a fuck about art or culture. And that's a silly thing to say, to make assumptions about, let's say tech bros don't care about music, but the industries and like everything from Napster to Spotify, let's say emanations of power that are uninterested in creativity. We now live in an era where creative is a noun. It describes a person that is actually paid to not actually be creative. They're paid to fulfill a function in a journeyman sort of way in a corporate environment.
Yeah, that's totally what I do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm literally a creative. Like,
Yes.
which is always seems mildly embarrassing to me to refer to yourself like that, but it's just what people do.
I know. Well, it's also like the word content. I mean, I feel like we're not saying anything horribly unique or revelatory, but the emergence of the word content, which, essentially reduces the creative output of artists to data.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't, though, and I have an example. I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm done.
Justin Hawkins, the lead singer of The Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
So he has a YouTube channel, which I think you would describe as content and not art. Like, his music is art. I don't think his musings on other musicians. But I would say I like it better than his actual music. And because it's his personality and he's talking about stuff, like, I didn't realize what a great musician he is. He'll like listen to a song and just play it really quick, like the first time hearing it, which to me is like almost like a magic trick. When people can do that, I think it's one of the most amazing things that humans can do.
Yeah.
And he's just like a thoughtful, interesting guy. And he's making, for sure, like the whole model of YouTube is content. And, he's growing an audience. And I would be willing to bet that in a year or two, he will be making far more money off of YouTube than he ever made as a musician.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it's kind of interesting. The content thing, it's not just a brain drain of musicians. There's a whole thing like pretty much every app or technology platform you use on your phone, the whole point is to get you to look at an advertisement.
Sure.
So there's a lot of people who are like, well, I can just fill a moped full of tannerite and shoot it and blow it up on the internet and attract the same. So you're seeing a lot of like people who would have been like startup bros becoming content farm bros. And it's weird. Like you see it happen. I think it's going to burn out pretty quick, but it's where like your Logan Pauls and your Jake Pauls and all that stuff come from or are not come from. They kind of are the thing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that is perennial. There's always bottom feeders. I mean, the Kardashians preceded that. The way to be famous, it's more important to be famous than anything. How do I be famous? Well, actually, people pay more attention to you if you're vacuous and shitty than if you're doing something constructive.
Counterpoint, Lil Xan.
Don't know what that is.
So Lil Xan is a rapper, and he had like a couple hits. They were like, to me intolerable, but the young folk seem to like it. And his life is super wild. And he was making like the podcast circuits and shit like that. And he got into this thing where he was just literally just taking Xanax all day and going on podcasts and saying wild shit. So he got to this point where he was more famous for that than his music. And his career collapsed because he didn't make any more music. So I think you have to, maybe the Kardashians are the exception because I don't really know what they do other than capture attention. But you kind of need both, I think. Most people need both to break through. Like you can't just talk. I don't know. Or you could have been formally great, I think is another option. I don't know. I mean, I find YouTube to be really compelling. Like it's where I spend a lot of my attention these days.
I'm just sort of talking about the way that, like, you know, the problem with social media is the algorithms actually reveal that people want to fight or watch a fight more than they want most other types of communications in that space. So it leads people to unconsciously lean into those kinds of postings because that's where they get the most likes and that's where they get the most attention. And I think that's...
I mean, all that's like human psychology shit. And where I'm getting to, I'm not trying to like prosecute anything, but I'm thinking about like a potential difference between music and content producers. It seems like YouTube content producers are sort of more fairly paid than musicians on Spotify.
Oh, completely.
You know what I mean? Like, but then again, I mean, how many Spotify musicians are making $100K a year just as a benchmark versus how many like makeup vloggers are making $100K a year? I don't know what those numbers would be, but what I'm further getting at is in the case of YouTube, there's like one organization, sort of like the church used to be, was the one organization that sort of paid all the artists and kind of kept them going and stuff. And I'm wondering if like there's something about that you almost need like this metaphysical superstructure for musicians to really thrive.
Yes. For an artist to just exist and make money by selling their wares or dancing for their dinner as if they were making shoes or selling bread is very, very, very rare. They're usually in these weird situations where they're depending on GoFundMe, grants, institutions that share resources, government money.
Taxpayer theft in general.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, back to my superstructure idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the government pay pretty much everything I've ever seen that had a grant was god awful, music wise. Yeah,
really?
It's the worst, dude. It's the worst because
totally
it's like
disagree.
Because I mean, it's
Deeply.
essentially the government doing the thing. You know that I think either the church or the private sector can do better. Maybe I don't know. I'm just trying to razz you a little bit.
Yeah, that was.
But really,
hurtful.
though, like people who are just like, do you know? Okay, what do you think the overlap of musicians that make it on their own and musicians that live off of grants are?
Who the fuck knows?
Probably it's not even a Venn diagram.
There isn't
two
a lot
separate
of
circles.
Grant money for musicians is not the most plentiful thing, really.
But like none of those guys are making bangers. You know what I mean?
Well, the type of music that lends itself to grants, government grants, is not, in America, it's not techno and rock music and stuff like that.
It would be like Sunn.
It would be like Sunn.
But for some reason, Sunn has survived in the free market. Like why? It seems unlikely.
Okay, so Merce Cunningham, the choreographer, he was partners with John Cage.
Okay.
John Cage, if I'm to understand correctly, and I believe this is true, made most of his money as the composer for Merce Cunningham's dance project. Because living as a musician and traveling composer didn't pay as well as the grant money that a dance institution was able to pay him.
Yeah.
When I was attempting to be more serious about making money at music, I sort of realized that if I leaned into pursuing grants and consequently, and this is gross, doing work that lends itself to the type of work that attracts grant money, that seemed like actually a better strategy.
Prosecuting your cisgender heteronormative status.
Completely.
Yeah.
No, fully. That's, no, but you can't get a grant right now unless your work is about a resolutely left-leaning, on the lapel ideology.
So this sounds...
So if you're an artist who makes art about art, just formal art, it's really hard to get grant money right now. That's kind of in the rearview mirror at this point. It's very odd.
So this is like, seems, if you know me and you've listened to the show, this will seem totally at odds with my whole thing. But I'm pro reparations, and I feel like
I did not see that coming.
This is more reparational, and so I'm fine with it. Like, I would rather like somebody horribly unrepresented get a little bit of money than anyone get money. But I'd rather none of them get money. But I'm okay with this sort of shift. For some reason, it doesn't bother me. You would imagine I would bristle to it, but
yeah. Huh.
Probably my brain has been rewired by Sunn.
Yeah.
Do
we have anything else to say about the actual subject of this podcast?
This is going to be our least downloaded episode.
Possibly.
This is going to be the low mark for us, and we gotta get it back on track with some sort of like titties out slasher movie.
I am going to. Well, we were going to possibly talk about, just record an episode about Megan, but I watched it and it was so atrocious that I think I told you, please don't watch this movie.
Yeah,
it's a garbage movie.
I'm kind of in that AI and whatnot, so I think that or AI discourse rather.
Right.
So I was kind of interested, but I cannot
It's not good.
tolerate a PG-13 movie that's not done with. I was thinking about this today. I was like, what makes me tolerate PG-13 and below? It has to not have CGI. Like if Megan was a practical effects movie, I would probably be more on board with watching it at PG-13. But
Yeah.
by all accounts, it should have been R.
Yes. It might be worth actually doing an episode, but I will put out there, at least while we're talking about horror and having just come out of a conversation about Sunn, not unlike Sunn in a certain sense, Skinamarink, I so highly recommend. If you have like with Sunn, if you lean that way, Sunn is awesome. If you don't bother. Skinamarink. If you lean that way, it has more in common with like a Michael Snow or Ernie Gare structuralist film than it does with like the Scream franchise.
Man, Mark, we got to get these numbers up. I'm thinking like Freddy 2.
Sure.
Sure. Like that.
That's great.
Yeah. Maybe if you've listened this far,
Yeah.
what should we cover?
Yeah, just do email us.
Yeah.
Or if you see one of us on the street, just
That's not going to be me.
say
Can't catch me
something
slipping.
nice about Chad's dog and then suggest a movie.
I will sick the dog on you.
Thanks for listening. I don't know if this is interesting anymore.